It was a quiet suburban neighborhood, nestled in the heart of a small town. Everything seemed normal, until one day, a family moved into an old house on Elm Street. The house, though charming on the outside, had a history, one that would soon reveal itself in horrifying ways. On the surface, everything seemed fine, but as soon as the family unpacked and settled in, strange things began to happen. It started with the lights flickering. The father, trying to remain calm, chalked it up to faulty wiring. But then, things got worse. At night, the children began to hear footsteps in the attic. Cold drafts rushed through the house, even though the windows were sealed shut. But it wasn't until they started hearing whispers that they realized they weren't alone. One night, the youngest child woke up to see a shadowy figure standing at the foot of her bed. Terrified, she screamed, waking up her parents. When they rushed to her room, there was nothing there. But from that moment, things escalated quickly. Furniture would move by itself. Doors slammed shut without anyone touching them. The family was being tormented by an unseen force. After a few weeks of constant paranormal activity, the family was forced to leave. They never returned to that house on Elm Street again. Sometimes the most chilling encounters happen when we least expect them. This story is one that a man will never forget. It all began one stormy night on a desolate highway in the middle of nowhere. The man, driving home late from work, was exhausted but eager to get home. As he passed a lonely stretch of road, he noticed a figure standing on the side. A woman in a tattered white dress, drenched from the rain, her hand outstretched in a gesture of wanting a ride. Feeling a sense of sympathy, he slowed the car and pulled over. He offered her a ride, which she accepted without hesitation. The woman climbed into the passenger seat, and the man noticed she was shivering, looking pale, almost ghostly. She gave him a soft, almost haunting smile as she told him she was trying to get home. They exchanged small talk, but there was something unsettling about her presence. As they drove, the man realized she was becoming quieter and colder. As they reached the outskirts of town, the woman suddenly pointed to a house in the distance, saying, "Stop here. This is where I live." The driver pulled over, but when he looked over to offer a final goodbye, she was gone. He quickly exited the car and searched the area, but there was no trace of her. No footsteps in the rain. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. Months later, the man learned from locals that the house the woman had pointed to had burned down years ago. No one had lived there since. The woman he had picked up was a ghost. Sometimes, the darkest experiences occur in the most serene and beautiful of places. This next story takes us deep into the woods, where a group of friends had an unforgettable encounter with something far darker than they could ever imagine. A group of 5 friends, looking to enjoy a peaceful hike in the woods, thought it would be the perfect way to spend their weekend. They were excited for the adventure ahead, unaware that something sinister was waiting for them. As the night fell, they gathered around the campfire, telling stories and roasting marshmallows. But as the evening wore on, they began to hear strange noises, whispers carried by the wind, strange growls, and the sounds of branches snapping. One by one, they began to feel an unsettling presence around them. The air grew colder, and the laughter faded. They tried to ignore it, brushing off their fears as nerves from being out in the wilderness. But that was about to change. One of the friends, needing to relieve himself, wandered off into the woods. That's when the others heard him scream. They rushed toward his voice, only to find him standing frozen in place, staring into the darkness. He claimed that he had seen a figure, tall, dark, with glowing red eyes, standing just a few feet away from him. Before they could react, the figure vanished into the trees. Terrified, the group packed up and hurried back to the trail, but the eerie presence followed them. The whispers grew louder, the growls closer, and no matter how fast they ran, they couldn't escape the feeling that something was watching them. Finally, After what felt like hours, they emerged from the woods, but the encounter left them forever changed. To this day, none of them can explain what they saw, but they all agree on one thing. It wasn't human. Some fears are born from the unknown. This next story is about a woman who thought she was alone, but was being watched by someone, or something, for weeks without ever realizing it. A young woman living alone in a city apartment started to feel uneasy after noticing strange occurrences. At first, it was subtle. Items out of place, her phone going off at odd hours, and a creeping sensation that someone was watching her. She tried to dismiss it as her imagination. But one night, she heard a knock at the door. When she opened it, there was nothing there, just the wind. But something felt wrong. Evening, after returning home from work, she found a note slipped under her door. It read, "I see you." Panicking, she checked every window, every corner, but there was no sign of anyone. She called the police, but there was no evidence of a break-in. The notes kept coming, each one more chilling than the last. And then, one night, while walking to her car, she saw him, standing in the shadows, watching her. She ran, and after a harrowing chase, she never saw him again. But the experience haunted her, leaving her to wonder if the stalker had always been there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Our final story takes us to a place that most people would avoid at all costs, an abandoned asylum. But for a group of urban explorers, it was a place to satisfy their curiosity. And it would be their last. The group, eager to explore the long-abandoned asylum, had heard all the rumors. Tales of patients left to die, of dark experiments, and of restless spirits still roaming the halls. But none of them believed it, not until they stepped inside. As they made their way deeper into the asylum, the atmosphere grew heavy. The air was thick, and the walls seemed to close in on them. Strange noises echoed from the far reaches of the building, whispers, footsteps, and the occasional sound of metal scraping against the floor. One by one, the group began to split up, each exploring a different part of the asylum. But when they tried to regroup, they couldn't find one of their friends. They called out, but their friend was gone. The only sign of their presence was a blood-curdling scream echoing down the halls. Their search ended there. They ran, never looking back, but they couldn't shake the image of their friend's face, pale, twisted in fear, as if something had taken them. They never spoke of what happened that night, but the asylum still stands, abandoned and forgotten, waiting for the next soul brave enough to enter.